Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down a really powerful framework for activating and receiving help. And it's all based on a sermon by Apostle Joshua Selman. We're going to explore a kind of spiritual system that's designed to move you from a place of just being in need to a place of actually getting support.
You know that feeling, right? It's something we've all been through. You're in a tough spot, you know you need a hand, but for some reason, help just doesn't show up. Well, this explainer looks at a different perspective. It asks, what if receiving help isn't just a passive thing? What if you actually have to activate it? So, to answer that question, the sermon lays out this really cool three-part framework. We'll start with the foundation, the basic idea, and then we'll walk through three distinct keys: your internal posture, your external action, and then the life principle that kind of governs the whole thing. Okay, let's dive right in. Before we can even get to the keys, we have to understand the core problem that this whole framework is trying to solve. And this is really the foundational idea right here. The source argues that there's a big difference between just being in need and actually receiving support. The idea is that even if a higher power can help, that help isn't necessarily automatic. You see, there are these active principles, or keys as we'll call them, that we have to engage with first. So here it is. This is the roadmap. The sermon lays out these three keys, and they're all connected. It starts with your internal mindset, your posture. Then it moves to a very specific action you can take. And finally, it zooms out to this universal principle that can really shape your entire life. So let's see how this all builds, starting with the first and, honestly, the most foundational key. According to this teaching, everything, and I mean everything, starts with your internal state of being. Now, what's so interesting here is how brokenness is defined. It's not about beating yourself up or feeling worthless. No, not at all. It's about a deep, constant awareness that on your own, you're not enough. It's this really honest acknowledgement that you need help from a higher power. And the sermon points to this scripture to really drive the point home. The idea is that this specific posture, this humility, doesn't push divine help away. It actually attracts it. It's like this state of acknowledging you need help is something that a higher power just can't ignore. There's a parable in the sermon that just perfectly illustrates this. You've got two people praying. The proud guy basically says, "Hey God, I'm doing pretty good on my own, but, a little extra help would be nice." But the humble person, they come from a place of total dependence, just admitting their own insufficiency right from the start. So if you get one thing from this first key, get this. The sermon presents this posture of genuine, humble brokenness as being completely irresistible to a higher power. It's framed as pretty much the most effective state you can be in to attract divine intervention and help into your life. All right, so that's the internal posture. Now let's get into the second key, which builds directly on that foundation of humility and turns it into a real, tangible action. In this teaching, prayer is framed as something really active. It's not just a quiet ritual or a wish list. It's described as a call and response system, like an urgent cry for help that's specifically designed for when you're in distress, and it fully expects a response. An example used is the story of blind Bartimaeus. He didn't come up with some complex, eloquent prayer. He just cried out for mercy. And according to the source, that raw call for mercy is so incredibly powerful that it can actually bypass other spiritual requirements, like having perfect faith. And this is where it all comes full circle back to that first key. This statement directly links the absence of prayer to a posture of pride. The argument is that if you're not calling for help, you're basically saying, "I've got this on my own." You're communicating that you think you're sufficient, which is the total opposite of brokenness. Okay, now for the final key. This one moves beyond just a posture or a single action and into a universal principle that governs, everything. The law of sowing and reaping. The core concept here is that help doesn't just materialize out of thin air. It's a harvest. The amount of help and the kind of help you receive in your life is a direct result of the seeds of help you've planted in other people's lives. It's a spiritual law of cause and effect, plain and simple. The sermon uses this really fascinating term, the whatsoever seed, to describe every single thing you do. Think about that. Every action, every word, every attitude, good or bad, is a seed that you are planting. And every seed is absolutely guaranteed to produce a future harvest. And look at this. It just shows how wide-ranging this principle is. You can sow seeds of mercy and integrity for sure, but you can also sow seeds of laziness, wickedness, or just cutting corners.
Every single choice, big or small, is planting something that will eventually grow into something. This quote is used to show just how powerful this principle is, even across generations. Years after his best friend Jonathan had died, King David was actively searching for one of Jonathan's kids or grandkids to bless. Why? Not because of anything they had done, but because of a seed of kindness that Jonathan himself had sown long, long ago.
So the big question is, how do these three keys, humility, prayer, and sowing, how do they actually work together? Let's zoom out and take a look at the big picture.
See, they're not just separate steps. It's more like a reinforcing cycle. A genuine posture of humility naturally makes you want to call for help. And a person who truly understands their own need for mercy and help is way more likely to live a life sowing those same seeds for other people. It's a complete, holistic system for living. And here's the ultimate takeaway. This whole thing isn't just about you. The sermon argues that the total harvest of your actions, all those whatsoever seeds you've planted, that becomes your legacy. And it will either be a key that unlocks doors and opportunities for the people who come after you, or it'll be a padlock that slams those doors shut. And that leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. It forces you to look at your daily choices, your kindness, your integrity, your mercy, and ask yourself, what kind of future are you building? Not just for you, but for the generations to come. Are you sowing keys or are you sowing padlocks?